YTPC and YouTube, how are you all doing? Well, I've just been shoveling snow. Here's a clip of outside. So, as you see, it has snowed. We got a white Christmas on the 9th of January. No, we did have some over the Christmas days. The day before and after Christmas Eve, but now it's as it usually does, we get heavier snowfalls in January and February, and everything is white apart from where I've been shoveling and salting as good as I can with the salt that we had and with the shovel I had. So I've cleared the way to the shed of Shangri-La, which is what we call this particular shed, and that's my shovel. But we're still good for wood here, as you see, so we won't get cold. Plenty of wood for the next 2 or 3 winters probably. And after that, I decided I deserve a beer and a pipe. And pipe today is going to be this very simple corn cob with a 6mm filter. Parisa did actually a Christmas edition of 6mm filters. Something different. I got them last year, but I've still got quite a few of them left, so I shall be using that in this nice little cob, and in it I will be packing some Deep Hollow, because actually I'm in a Deep Hollow at the moment, but let me pack this and I'll get back to you. That's better. I'm in the shed of Shangri-La still. We're going to be here a few more days. Christmas was a bit tough in that we had some fatalities, deaths in the family from illness, and we were expecting that it could end that way, but when it happens, of course, it's a big shock. Now, I've agreed, of course, with my wife that we keep a lot of family detail private, so I won't talk more about that. And we've had quite a few people getting sick with the COVID, of course, which is the same all over the world. It looks like all of us are going to get this one. It's so infectious. The good news is everyone I know who has boosters and second vaccination, especially boosters, it's nothing worse than a cold. In the worst case, maybe a heavy cold and cough, but not bad at all. So that's the good news, I suppose. Sure, we'll be glad at the end of this year if we could say goodbye to that bloody virus. We will see. Spirit of St. Louis, actually, this one. I've got 2 of them because they were so cheap, and they are absolutely excellent little lighters from eBay. I think lots of you have actually got one of these now, but they work like you would pay 4 times much for this one. I think if you look around on eBay, there are still those low price offers on these, and they are just fantastic. thanks to Dale Piper again, because he tipped us off about these ones. Well, this is of course McClelland's, and there's still a guy in Zurich who sells a few tins of this, so I got quite a few. And it's based on, of course, Deep Hollow was a place in Hobbiton, so Hobbiton Piper should get some of this if you can. There's still a lot of McClelland around in stashes, you know, people who bought like immense quantities and for one reason or another decide to sell it off, and occasionally that comes into the market as well. But it's very pleasant, sweet, full of Virginia. I've still got the tin up here because I kept it because this is not spoiled by too many warning labels, just a US tax exempt label. And as with any McClelland, of course, it's great tobacco, beautifully blended, and it's actually Black Stove Virginias and some rich red Virginias in it, and it's really pleasant, you know, and not overly sweet, but you pick up the sweetness very easily. And it's got some age on it now, because anything McClelland's is older than 2018, I suppose. Oh yeah, it's on the bottom of the tin. December 18th, 2015. You can just see it there at 2015, so that had quite some age on it. Put it in a jar, and I normally smoke cobs in summertime generally, and sometimes a bit in autumn, but I just fancied a cob today. So in theory you could, a lot of people say minimum 7 pipes, that you get a daily rotation, and if you really are on a budget, you could have all of those as cobs, you know, relatively inexpensively. And I think several YTPC members have actually proved that cobs last at least 10 years if you look after them a little bit. This is one of the, I think this is the first cob I bought in Switzerland when I didn't know better, so I paid twice as much for it in 2018, so, you know, they char a bit at the top, but I could see this going another 5 years at least. Well, actually, I just wanted to do a VR to Jason Northwest Piper, because he's got a great channel, and it's growing fantastically quickly, because he always talks about interesting stuff, you know. And that's all we really want, is to have a pipe with someone and hear about interesting stuff. So he does that brilliantly well. He's also a shedder. So as a fellow shedder, Jason, I will make a VR to you. Don't put me in the drawer, because I've got no room for anything anymore. So if you insist, and were I to be drawn, then I will nominate someone else to receive it. But otherwise, don't worry. But your questions were so brilliant And as Charlie Boynton said, that this really gets you thinking. Everybody actually in the VR has said this really makes you ponder. So, as I understood the questions, it's like, what would make the big difference to the world, for a better place, dramatically? And as you know, I've got a scientific background, so I couldn't rule it out. I honestly believe this. It will be the control of nuclear fusion. Now that's not the sort of answer that most people have given, because they've rightly addressed things like wisdom and love and other things, and I totally agree with all of their answers as well. But given we're going to probably die off in about 200 years if we don't solve global warming now, because if it gets to run away, it won't make any difference anymore. Here's the thing in a nutshell. A nuclear fusion plant optimally could replace 10 nuclear fission plants. A nuclear fusion plant will never have a Fukushima or a Chernobyl, because you pull the plug out and it shuts down immediately. And there's no sort of out of control nuclear pile that will then explode or anything. It just is very easy to, relatively at least, in the technique to close it down. And the third thing is there's there's no long-lived waste, and there's only tritium and short-lived isotopes in much smaller quantity to deal with nuclear fusion. I mean, I'm talking about 1,000 times less and short-lived. So it's not the threat that nuclear fission is. Now, of course, in Europe, in our stupidity after Fukushima, a lot of countries, politicians said, oh, we'll get rid of all of them, we'll just have windmills and solar power. And they're starting to realise that even with natural gas, it's not going to be enough. And it's it surprised me that Angela Merkel went that direction. She has a scientific background, and I would have put the caveat in, when we get nuclear fusion efficiently and genuinely producing power, that could be a direction we go to. Now, there's a lot of prototypes out there. I won't go into great detail, and there's a lot of YouTube videos about those prototypes, and the question is, how far can they scale up? They already proved that they can get 10-to-1 energy from the torus. Now, that doesn't mean 10-to-1 energy from all the other energy they put in to make that plasma torus. So that they've still got to solve, and that will take, in theory, we could solve it, I believe, in about 10 years. And the Chinese are putting trillions in, and Europe and America and France. That's what I believe. If we have it, we will have no greenhouse gas anymore. We could replace all of the other electricity generating methods. We could keep wind power, keep solar power, but basically we would have no need for gas or coal or anything like that. But it's not so easy, of course. Everyone's been saying 35 years ago, everyone was saying 35 years we'll have it, and we still don't. So but if we would have it, it would solve that problem. And all of mankind's problems often go away when you've got, enough food and prosperity, and, when all of those problems go away. People sort of charging down the street with a bloody axe, saying, well, you know, suddenly think, oh, you know, I don't need to do this. I'll have a job. You know, the world's not going to end. Everything's going to be okay, and people sort of calm down. So I think it would do the world a lot of good if we got nuclear fusion. That's number one. Next one is, what age would you ideally want to stay at forever? Difficult for me because I'm a Time Lord, so, you know, 900 years doesn't make any sense, does it really? But my apparent age in this character that I inhabit is 63. Well, if I were a normal human, you know, let's answer it that way. I probably would think that 30 to 35 would be good, because you've still got the benefits of youth, you've got most of your optimal strength as a man, and you have a certain amount of wisdom, let's say, certainly more than when you were a teenager, and even in your early 20s, when lots of men, me no exception, make the usual mistakes. Sometimes you're warned about them from an uncle or your parents, and you know, sometimes we're not warned about them and we just have to trip over them and pick ourselves up. So I suppose I would say, yeah, something like 35, you know, around that age would be optimal. Never thought about it because, you know, it doesn't apply to me, really. And then the third question was about this revelation, you know, that you have in your life. There's a revelation. It's got a little wheel, so you have to not inadvertently move that wheel, but it's otherwise very reliable. Just going to have a sip of beer. All the labels fell off in the summer when we had a big party. We put them in a tank of water, but they're still good, you know, if you keep them cool. A bottle of beer will keep much longer over its sell-by date. This is actually Walliser beer, which is from the county here in southern Switzerland. It's very good. Well, here's the thing. I was always quite reserved, you could even say shy, when I was younger, and would always listen to other people's arguments and think, well, they could be right, you know, and this, and would never really assume that I was necessarily right. I remember an experience where we had a representative of Motorola at the business school telling us about iridium and just saying how this is going to revolutionary, you throw your cell phones away and this will be the thing, and relied on satellites around the Earth. And I asked the question, said, aren't you worried about the debris up there, damage to satellites? Because after all, the space shuttle was developed to repair constantly damaged satellites, that either things have failed, but sometimes they were damaged by all this debris. I think it's a commonly known problem for satellites. And this chap just shook his head, looking at me pitifully, saying, I have 3,000 scientists in my company, and I'm sure they've thought about that. You know, what do you want? And then he went on to a long rant about, you know, if we're afraid to go into big projects and leave it all to the Americans because it was being run out of Germany and he was the CEO, you know, we will just not have any big projects. And everyone thought that was fantastic and laughed at my question. If you look back today, the Iridium project of Motorola was the most costly flop in their history, and is in the top 5 flops, most costly, I'm talking about trillions of dollars, ever in modern history. And the reason is it didn't work. The satellites were damaged. They were also parked in low orbit, and they got great disturbances from higher satellites. And I could go into a lot of detail, but it means he was wrong on every count. Also, of course, the Iridium phone, you could only work if you were outside. It didn't work if you were in a building or trees were around or this kind of thing. And that question I also asked him, okay, on the marketing side, and he gave me the same. He said, I have 1,000 top marketers, please don't ask these stupid questions. And all these reasons were that it failed. And what I saw is some people are so arrogant, and they just get very good at rhetoric and putting people down, and it doesn't make any logical sense, and they're not open to be challenged. And I, at that point, realized I'm not going to take this anymore. I will either stand up in protest and say you're a bloody idiot, or I will leave, which is what I did in that case, because the dean of our business school was a personal friend, and if I'd have attacked him, that could have been counterproductive for my MBA. So sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. But in any case, I just don't let it wash over me anymore. The revelation is, you have to realize you might be right. You might be completely right. And this arrogant person trying to bulldoze you over might be a bloody idiot. And I'm sure as a CEO, he had so much money stashed away and so many nice golden handshakes that he didn't suffer at all. But probably thousands and thousands of people lost jobs. And the legacy of this fool is we have all that junk up there, because Iridium shot something like, 50 satellites in a ring around the Earth, maybe even more. And a lot of them still there. So that's what we got out of them and that project of Motorola. It almost wasted the company. So the message is, if you really think you're right and you've got logical arguments and facts behind it, stand to. Sometimes you can't have an open fight because, the terrain is like that. The only thing that shocked me even more than the behaviour of that person was the crowd around, which immediately latched on. But I found it curious that nobody just had some reserve to think, well, he might have a point, And that is a human dynamic, which I also realised you have to be aware of the mob or the crowd behaviour. Sometimes is beyond any kind of reflection. And that's generally why I like pipe smokers, because we are reflective. We sit back and we consider. Most of us. Not to make it too long, that's my VR, and nice to just have a rest in the shed and have this beautiful tobacco, Deep Hollow, in a cob. And in praise to cobs, I don't have one cob that doesn't actually smoke well. They are all good smokers. So I think once you get a bit of char wall on it, you don't really notice too much difference between that char wall on the bowl and one of a briar. So once you've sort of broken in, you know, just as good. Anyway, that's it for today, and might be another 5 days before I make another video, because we've got to relocate back to where we are and there's a lot to sort out. But I'll see you soon. Take care everyone. Cheers. Bye bye.